Have you ever wondered how many decisions that could change the course of the planet happen while most of us are distracted? Well, as you read this, something monumental has been set in motion. The UN's Pact for the Future. It promises to unite nations, eradicate problems like hunger and inequality, and save the planet from destruction. Sounds perfect, right? But wait, is it really everything it seems? This pact isn't just about good intentions. For some, it represents hope. For others, it is a harbinger of global control, centralized power, and even the fulfillment of ancient prophecies. Are we standing on the brink of a new era or on the edge of a hidden plan that could forever transform how we live? Now is the time to take a closer look, connect the dots, and understand what's truly at stake. And the question remains, are you ready to see what many still don't? The United Nations has surprised the world with an ambitious pact called the Pact for the Future. The promise is grand, uniting nations around common goals like peace, equality, and sustainability. But is that really all there is to it? Some question the real motives behind this initiative, suspecting it might mask a strategy for centralized control. Imagine a scenario where your country's decisions are guided by a global entity. Intriguing, isn't it? The idea of a better future sparks hope but also raises eyebrows. Let's talk practical examples. Imagine a village in rural Africa finally receiving resources to fight hunger or a coastal city benefiting from strategies to combat rising sea levels. But does this come at a price? What if this aid is accompanied by policies that could limit local autonomy? The pact, according to the UN, aims to create a system where no one is left behind. But is that feasible in a world with such divergent interests? There's something in the undertones, like a silent wind announcing a storm. The idea of placing all nations under one umbrella seems idealistic, but history shows us that great promises come with significant challenges. This pact, celebrated by some, already faces resistance from others. This leads us to ponder. Can these noble global objectives coexist with the unique realities of individual nations? This raises a bigger question about grand goals that promise to change the world. The goals announced by the Pact for the Future sound like a collective dream. Eradicating hunger, ending poverty, eliminating nuclear threats, and creating a global governance system to address climate change and social justice. It's like a list of New Year's resolutions on a planetary scale. However, the lingering question is, how do we turn such lofty ideals into concrete actions? For instance, if not all countries can solve their internal problems, how can they be expected to lead such a vast movement? Think of a farmer in rural Brazil struggling to cultivate his land, now part of a global sustainability plan. It sounds great, right? But what if the pact's goals prioritize interests far removed from his reality? Often, grand promises require equally grand efforts to align regional needs with global demands. This ambition, while inspiring, also invites skepticism. Who will monitor progress? Who will be held accountable for failures? Despite this, there is undeniably something powerful about seeing world leaders agree to act collectively. The promise that no one will be left behind is undoubtedly an attractive idea. But we can't ignore the challenges. Funding, governance, and even cooperation among historically opposed countries. This vision of a harmonious future must overcome many barriers before becoming a reality. At the same time, it opens space for a more intriguing question. How will nations react to this ambitious proposal? Not everyone is excited about the Pact for the Future. Some leaders, like Argentina's president, have raised strong objections, arguing that this pact could compromise national sovereignty. Imagine having your home governed by a neighbor who promises organization but insists on dictating all the rules. Uncomfortable, isn't it? That's the fear of many nations, which see centralization as a risk of losing control over their own decisions. However, the opposition isn't limited to politics. Religious leaders and eschatological scholars are also paying attention, drawing parallels with biblical prophecies that speak of centralized global governance. For some, this is not just public policy. It's a sign of things to come. The mere fact that prominent leaders have expressed such resistance is, in itself, an invitation to reflection. How can global progress be balanced with national freedom? This resistance reveals a crucial point. Not all promises of progress come without costs. Concerns about sovereignty, autonomy, and even cultural identity are not minor issues. These criticisms lead us to question whether the Pact for the Future truly represents an evolution or signals more complex times ahead. Speaking of complexity, the historical impact of such agreements has been controversial before. Historical comparisons add a deeper dimension to the Pact for the Future. Many liken it to the creation of the State of Israel in 1948, a milestone that transformed not only geopolitics but also the understanding of biblical prophecies. Imagine being present at that moment and witnessing something that seemed written in the stars. Now, with this new pact, there's a sense that we're living another chapter of a book many believe has already been planned. These comparisons are not without reason. The creation of Israel is considered by many scholars to be the fulfillment of prophecy, and for those observing the Pact for the Future, history seems to be repeating itself. Just as Israel redefined borders, politics, and beliefs, this pact promises to reshape global governance. But are the lessons of the past being taken into account? Or are we boarding a runaway train to an uncertain destination? Looking back, historical events have always served as compasses for understanding the present. Similarly, the Pact for the Future carries this weight. Will it be a milestone of hope or a harbinger of something bigger and more complex? As these questions echo, deeper ones arise about the Pact's impacts on what many consider to be a divine plan. This leads us directly to the eschatological implications that permeate this entire debate. For many, the Pact for the Future is more than a political agreement. It is a possible fulfillment of eschatological prophecies. According to some biblical scholars, documents like this could set the stage for the arrival of a centralizing figure, such as the Antichrist mentioned in the book of Daniel and Revelation. Imagine living in a time when global political actions seem to mirror millennia-old narratives. For believers, this is both fascinating and alarming. The idea of a world government uniting nations under a single set of rules is mentioned in various religious texts as a prelude to difficult times. These parallels keep people on alert, especially when global power centralization is discussed. It's as if every step taken by organizations like the UN is writing a script that has already been read. For some, this isn't coincidence. It's destiny. Even for skeptics, there's something intriguing about how current events often resonate with ancient predictions. The Pact, with its promise of uniting nations and solving global problems, may seem like the ideal solution. But for those viewing it through the lens of faith, it could be the beginning of something darker. This prompts us to ask, how prepared are we to deal with the impact of such intense centralization? The Pact for the Future raises a delicate question. How safe is it to concentrate so much power in a single global entity? Critics point out that the centralized governance proposed by the Pact could end up stifling the autonomy of nations. Imagine a global government capable of making unilateral decisions about security, economy, and justice. It seems efficient at first glance, but who guarantees that this power won't be used arbitrarily? The Bible, in passages like Revelation 13, already speaks of centralized power that will govern nations in the end times. For many, the resemblance to the Pact is no mere coincidence. Even outside the religious context, history is full of examples of how concentrated power often leads to abuse. From ancient empires to modern regimes, the lesson seems clear. The balance of power is essential to preserving individual and collective freedoms. The challenge, then, is how to create a system that is effective without compromising the rights and sovereignty of nations. Many fear that the balance between global security and personal freedom could be lost in this process. This concern becomes even more significant when considering the timing of this pact, raising suspicions that make us look at the calendar with a mix of curiosity and apprehension. The timing of the Pact for the Future signing did not go unnoticed, especially by those attentive to symbolism. The date coincides with the Jewish New Year and the Feast of Trumpets, events with significant weight in the prophetic calendar. Doesn't it seem curious that such a landmark global decision occurs precisely during a period associated with judgment and repentance? For those observing the signs, this is more than coincidence. It's a warning. The Feast of Trumpets, celebrated as a time of reflection and preparation, draws parallels to what many consider the beginning of a new cycle in divine plans. For some, this reinforces the idea that the pact isn't just policy but a milestone in a prophetic script unfolding before our eyes. This alignment of spiritual and political events adds an almost supernatural touch to analyzing what is happening. Whether you see this as a curiosity or as confirmation of something greater, it's impossible to ignore the impact of timing. Major decisions made on dates laden with symbolism tend to leave profound marks on history. And this pact, signed at such a significant moment, invites us to reflect on the possible outcomes it may bring. After all, what else could be reserved in a future that seems so carefully orchestrated? Now that you understand the implications of the pact for the future, the question arises, what will you do with this knowledge? Will you take a stand, seek more information, and participate in the discussions shaping our destiny? Or will you let these decisions be made without your reflection? Remember, great changes in the world start with small individual steps. So, how about starting today? Question, dialogue, and, above all, stay alert. The future won't be decided solely by great leaders or global organizations, but also by people like you who choose to stay informed and act. Subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and keep following our content to understand the behind the scenes of these transformations. Your next choice could be the first step in making a real impact on the world. Are you ready to take that step?